Our senior political analyst Marwan Bishara joins me again in studio, and joining us from New York is Rami Khouri. He's a public policy fellow at the American University in Beirut. Rami, good to have you with us on the programme, and of course Marwan too. Rami, can I come to you first? We just want to get your reaction on this arrival of William Burns into Qatar on Thursday. Obviously, he's done a lot of shuttle diplomacy in the past few days. What do you make of what's gone on and what might happen on Thursday here in Doha?
Well, a couple of important things. Bill Burns knows the Middle East better than any of the people running diplomacy out of Washington, as far as I can tell. He's served for many years in the Middle East and is well aware of how people behave and what needs to be done. So that's significant. Second of all, to bring the CIA head in is politically meaningful. So something important is going on. Whether his job is to put more pressure on the various Arab groups or simply to find a workable solution that will satisfy everybody, it's too early to tell because there aren't very many details. But the level of American involvement now and the suggestions coming out of the U.S., they're like every 5 hours, some American official says something, two-state, a PA, this and that. That is, in a sense, saying that Hamas has achieved much of its aims, which is to get the Palestine issue discussed on a global level by the top people in the G7 and NATO and here and there. So that's an important fact to keep in mind.
And of course, Marwan's given us his opinion on that, but let's get back to now the area that we know you're a complete expert on, and that is Lebanon. We can't avoid the fact that there are skirmishes on that border between northern Israel and southern Lebanon. Hezbollah and its deputy chief have already said that, if the fighting continues, we may get involved even more so. How dangerous is this talk right now?
Oh, in theory, it's very dangerous. If Hezbollah gets involved in a full war with Israel, it's likely to draw in other people like the Americans, like the Iranians, maybe people in Syria. I still don't think that's going to happen. I think what Hezbollah is doing is its intent for the moment. It's following the political discussions very, very closely. But keep in mind, something the Israelis should remember, which they don't like to remember, 30, 40 years ago, they tried to set up a puppet regime in South Lebanon, the South Lebanon Army, and running it. And it was really pretty atrocious. And they're talking of something similar. I interpret what Blinken said about the PA, his conditions, it won't be this, it won't be that, as they're trying to set up something in Palestine under puppet leaderships that they and the Israelis would control. That's how, maybe that's a too strong an interpretation. Yeah. We don't hear anything about Palestinian self-determination, sovereignty, free will, etc. So we have to really wait till these phrases are interpreted in action.
Marwan, let me bring you in on that, because Sheikh Naim Qasim actually said in a quote, this is very, very serious and very dangerous developments that could occur in the region, and no one would be able to stop the repercussions. I mean, basically, Hezbollah has also, within that caveat, talked about if the bombing continues in Gaza and the death toll increases, we can't hold back, is what I'm reading between the lines.
Yes. Well, look, Hezbollah has Lebanese consideration and it has regional consideration. The Lebanese consideration is that for the last good number of years, at least 2006, they became part and parcel of the Lebanese political system. They actually entered the government. And hence, their considerations are not just one of a resistance group, they're also one of a political party within the country. And hence, what could happen to Lebanon in case of a war in the north or in the South Lebanon, that's, of course, is of a major consideration. But I think the other consideration they probably must be thinking about, and thinking about why the Americans deployed such an armada to the Eastern Mediterranean, is that they probably figure with the scope, depth, and the viciousness of the Israeli war in Gaza, that they are next. Because if the Israelis are saying anything, they are saying we cannot afford another October 7, no matter what, no matter from where. So the idea that they want to finish off Hamas, in their words, and regain control or occupy Gaza, probably the next front for them, so as not to be exposed to another October 7, is to deal with the question of Hezbollah. That means either political settlement, meaning once and for all shut down Hezbollah, or a war. And I think the Israelis are dangerous enough, reckless enough at this point in time for them to start the war in Lebanon.
Let me get Rami's reaction to what Marwan said. Would you agree, disagree? But also, Rami, there is this whole scenario for our international viewers. They want to know the connection, perhaps, between Hamas and Hezbollah. Is there one? Can you just clarify for our viewers what that relationship is? Because there was, in the early parts of this war, comments from Hamas that they felt Hezbollah should have been more involved.
There are many relationships between them and with Iran and with the Ansarullah, the Houthis in Yemen, and groups in Iraq and Syria. There is an axis, a regional axis of resistance and deterrence. They call themselves. They've been operating for 20 years or so. They train together. They learn from each other. I mean, the road that Hamas has traveled in the last 10 years clearly has benefited from the knowledge that Hezbollah has and Hezbollah's advances. And Iran is linked. We don't know the details, but clearly they have these links together. But Hamas and Hezbollah are nationally anchored resistance movements. Hamas is a Palestinian movement. Hezbollah is a Lebanese movement. Unlike, the Americans and the Israelis and their propaganda keep talking about ISIS. ISIS is not a nationally anchored resistance movement with a popular support. It's a bunch of violent, wayward men and women, and creating what they think will make their lives better, but the whole world rejects them. But Hamas and Hezbollah are a whole different kettle of fish. They are serious national movements with an Islamist bent to them. They have regional links to them, and they clearly help each other. So, and the whole world now, literally the whole world is talking about Hamas and Gaza. So that's quite striking. Okay. I agree with Marwan that the Israelis are reckless enough and worried enough to maybe start a war in Lebanon. I don't think they can destroy Hezbollah. They would destroy half of Lebanon, and much of Israel would be destroyed as well. But there's a third option to what Marwan said, which is that if people really get worried everywhere, and I think they're moving in that direction, they can try to resolve the Arab-Israeli, Palestinian-Israeli conflict in a way that is negotiated, that is based on the rule of law and international principles, and is absolutely fair to everybody. So the Palestinians, the Israelis, the Lebanese, everybody gets their land, their sovereignty, the refugee issue is resolved. This is a big sticker item. But it is the ultimate option and the best option, I think, and many people think and I've been talking to people in New York in diplomacy and other fields, and this is something that they're all desperately trying to figure out. So we have to keep that in mind as well. But it's not going to happen with the existing governments. There has to be new leaderships everywhere.
Rami, thank you. Marwan, just your final thoughts on this. What do you think the tipping point will be for Hezbollah to get involved if they feel they need to, with the sort of veiled threats that we're hearing when they're looking at what's going on in Gaza?
Well, I mean, judging from the speech by the leader of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, last week, is that they're already involved. And in fact, according to his estimate, they're already drawing in a third of the Israeli military power to the north and basically lessening the pressure on Gaza. And that there are already, of course, so many skirmishes and dozens of people have died both on the Israeli and the Hezbollah side. But we need to underline what we just heard now, because this is very important. Our viewers around the world, because it's such a complicated issue, they tend to, mix things up. Hamas and Hezbollah are two groups, resistance groups, that were born after the occupation. They are not the reason for the occupation. They were product of Israeli occupation of Lebanon and the Israeli occupation of Palestine. After Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza in 1967, and after it occupied Lebanon in 1982, this resistance movement sprung out in order to fight the occupation of their country, of their homeland, to protect their people. Once again, I tell you, and I challenge you, to show me a single Western leader that says Hezbollah or the Lebanese or the Palestinians have a right for self-defense, like they talk about Israel's right to self-defense. Do the Lebanese people and the Palestinian people have a right to self-defense or not? Now, the other thing that sort of goes right into that is the fact that Israel's insecurity is not because of Hezbollah and Hamas. Israel's insecurity because it's a colonial entity estranged in an Arab region. And Hezbollah and Hamas are potent resistance movement, not just because they're associated with Iran, associated to other so-called the acts of resistance. It's because the Arabs are impotent. The Arabs are divided. We have 20 plus Arab nations, Arab leaders, incapable of confronting Israel, incapable of using leverage against Israel, incapable of helping the Palestinian people except with declarations. The only people who stood up to Israel and its occupation and its massacres and its genocide and its ethnic cleansing are the resistance movements. If there was an international community that would step in and use this leverage against Israel, if there was a serious, competent Arab leadership, I don't think there will be ever a need for a Hamas or a Hezbollah in the region.
Interesting thoughts. We'll have to leave it there. Rami Khouri in Washington, thanks very much for joining us on Al Jazeera. And again, Marwan, thanks again for your analysis. We'll be speaking again through the day.